Okay, so I think I'd feel pretty good if I even shot just one video in Bangkok, and hopefully this is it. I actually tried to shoot a couple videos, have like a couple hours recorded, but I don't think any of it really would make the cut. Um, so I've kind of shifted things around, and I kind of know what I want to say in this video. And the way I want to go about this video is I am very confident in the in the content of this, right? And I feel like I won't have to like really tie it all together because the content itself, uh, just the way I put it out, should allow you to really come up with how this thing all works. Okay. But I will give us a very loose outline of what I'm saying. And a lot of this is pretty Nietzschean, as in the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. And what we're going to do today is reevaluate some values, okay? And this is one of Nietzsche's thing. And Nietzsche, he understood this whole idea, he writes books on it, of rights, right? And we're going to talk about how rights are, I guess you could say, utilized in society. And we are going to rearrange things to make it more valuable, okay? But to understand the value in, I would say, a Nietzschean perspective, I would say that value has to do with morality, okay? So the realm that extends beyond yourself is morality. And what else I've been trying to get to, and this is a really good chunk of it, is the idea of power, okay? Here I am correlating this idea with power, morality, okay? Because in the previous videos that I shot this year, or at least in the Aristotle video, what I kind of said was that on one hand, right, if you were to just gratify yourself and do what is best for your own gratification, then you are just an animal, right? But when you repose that idea, repose from that activity, there's a possibility of a whole moral or ethical dimension to the world, right? And here, I'm going to specifically say that this moral dimension, for you to make things useful, when you do it for morality, it's more powerful than your own individual gratification, okay? I'm guessing what I'm trying to say is when we diminish our rights, or when we shuffle our rights around to make it fit more into our everyday lives, we become more powerful, okay? And I know it's vague, but you're gonna tie all this together, and you're gonna have the best political mindset in the world, right? Exclusively on this page, okay? So the first statement I'm gonna start with is how our current president is like Joseph Stalin. And I'm gonna talk about what happened in Russia during the Stalinist period, okay? But I'm gonna start kind of a little bit before that. Okay. So, my earlier understanding of Russian politics starts off with Lenin, Vladimir Lenin. Excuse me. But Vladimir Lenin, he started what you call the Bolshevik Revolution. And from what I understand, it was a Jewish revolution. But he was the one who overthrew the monarchy, right? I guess you could say is comparable to the French Revolution. But this is, you know, late 1800s. And back then, they didn't have kings and queens, but the name was the Tsars, right? I don't know if it was a family or it's just a royal title, but the Tsars is who you could say Lenin overthrew. Okay. So Lenin gets control of Russia, right? And he writes a lot of stuff about how the media should be in control of things by the right people, I guess you could say, right? Meanwhile, Stalin is kind of growing up, I guess, younger than Lenin, but he's on the streets. He's a good writer, I guess you could say. But he writes at the same time he's doing his stuff on the street, like a real street. He ran with a real street gang, right? But he could write. Lenin on his deathbed specifically said that he did not want Stalin to rule, right? And the Russian type of ruling was done by what I don't want to say communist because I'm going to say that Stalin wasn't a communist, and I'll point it out, and I'll point out why. But you could say in Russia or China or even Vietnam, I could say a lot of the Asian countries, you could say that it's ran by a central committee style, right? It's more of a single party system where they deliberate things as a single party. Okay. Different from a two-party system, at least. What a central committee does is that it uses a common consensus. And with this common consensus, you could have what you call like a banquet, right? And there's members in this banquet, and every member has a seat where, to some degree, the common consensus, in a way, knows where everyone sits, right? At the banquet, like who is the boss, right? Lenin was the boss in this common consensus. And one of my teachers, who was a PhD from Beijing, she told me a lot about Chinese politics, is that in this style of politics, people know who the rulers are going to be without a election, and it's not really contested, right? I remember, I think what the current president is Xi Jinping. She knew 2 years before, or 1 year before he became president, that he was going to be president, and this was the common consensus of China. Everybody in China knew who the next president was going to be, and the transition was as if it never happened, right? Countries like China and Russia seem to go through a more seamless transition. Well, maybe not Russia, but at least China and Vietnam go through a more seamless transition between leaders. In America, we go through a soap opera, right? People's wives get insulted, and it's kind of entertaining if you dislike the opponent, right? When they offend each other. But in a central committee style, you can kind of say that they skip all those types of theatrics, right? It's taken more seriously, I guess, in certain senses, right? I'm gonna say that it's hard to put blame on another party if it's your party, right? So to go a little further, I want to say a central committee type of government share mistakes rather than putting blame on another party, right? And on top of that, the citizens could spend a lot less time, right? It has to do with energy that they expend when understanding their government, that the dichotomy, right? Wasting breath on the dichotomy of the two-party system. Like, this is what this party did, you call them this name, and this is what this other party did, and you call them that name. Like, just right there, right? We see an expended energy being wasted compared to a central committee. Okay. All right, so before we move on, I want to leave us with a brainy quote, or just an idea that it's kind of Nietzschean, and it's kind of hard to grasp because there's nothing to like really use to differentiate it, right? But the more we become a single individual, the more we get to be individualized, right? And it is one of those things where it's very lofty to understand, but this is something really good to ponder upon, okay? So I'm actually gonna take a little drink of this energy drink, and I never shot a philosophy video on caffeine. I tried it before and I didn't like it, so I'm gonna try it. And I just wanna tell people that it's gonna change me a little bit, but I'm still gonna do it because I wanna figure out a way to get more out of me in my philosophy this year. So in Russian politics at that time, there was three major figures that we have received in the Western world. And there's Lenin, Stalin, and one more fella named Leon Trotsky. Okay. Leon Trotsky, he was more of an intellect. He said one time that he would spend his life as a proletariat, right? But he was also a writer, like Joseph Stalin. But during their politicking, or after Lenin was in his deathbed, there was kind of like a power grab, right? And Joseph Stalin won out over Leon Trotsky. And what happens is Leon Trotsky, he goes to Mexico in exile from Joseph Stalin's rule, okay? I'm gonna put that to the side. So now I'm gonna talk about Chinese politics and compare it to what's going on in Russia. And I'm just doing this because I don't know if I ever get a chance to talk about it again. Okay, and it's pretty good information, and it has to do with not necessarily an individual, collective society, and the individuals inside of that. This has to do with some type of internationalism or some type of nationalism. Okay. So in the early 1900s, when this was going on in Russia, China was going through a civil war, right? And these parties were, on one hand, the leader of the CCP, which is Mao Zedong, right? Chairman Mao, which means cat in Chinese. And the other one was a fellow named Kai Shek, right? Which was the leader of the KMT. And I think it's something like the Kuomintang or something, the KMT. And Mao was the CCP, right? Communist Chinese Party or something. Regardless, the KMT were the nationalists. The CCP was, I guess, a communist party. They were going through a civil war, right? But at the same time, they were under attack. They were being occupied by the Japanese, right? And they say how Mao ousted out the KMT was that while the KMT was busy on attacking Mao, right? While Mao was like somewhere deep into the country, Mao was collecting his face among the Chinese people by advocating to fight the Japanese rather than the Civil War. But the KMT's Kai Shek was busy fighting the Civil War against Mao, right? And so when Mao was successful in rallying all of China to go against the Japanese, the KMT kind of knew they lost, right? So they took all of, they say, China's wealth to Taiwan. Okay, they say in Taiwan has the best artifact museums because the KMT took all the artifacts from China and took it to Taiwan, right? A lot of the things that stem from today that you see between Taiwan and China, this is the, you can say, the last straw, right? It's major, and it's still the animosity is still there, okay? What was going on in Russia during the early 1900s is we have what you call the Red Army, right? But who actually solidified or got together the Red Army was Leon Trotsky, right? And he was doing his thing with the Central Committee. And Joseph Stalin was in the Central Committee, but Joseph Stalin was not on the outskirts, right? He was politicking with the generals and stuff. But Stalin was just politicking with the Central Committee, right? He had more favor. But Leon Trotsky is the one who united the Red Army, I guess you could say, for it to become what it was in World War II. Okay, those are two different scenarios, but one thing I'm going to say that's, again, at this point, is pretty lofty, but it's something to ponder about. It's some good to ponder about, right? Hegel says one thing that we learn about history is that we do not learn about history, right? And excuse me, we lack a lot of times this type of political knowledge so we could learn from, right? And I'm gonna go further about what we don't utilize in what we learned in history, okay? So to clarify things, uh, from what I understand is Trotsky dealing with the generals of Russia, he was able to negotiate a withdrawal from World War One, right? He withdrew Russia from World War One, but he knew the generals and stuff. Okay. Lenin dies in 1924, right? He had the head seat, but Stalin was already in a high position 2 years before he died, right? In 1922, Stalin held his position till way after Lenin dies, right? So once Stalin gets into power in 1927, Leon Trotsky goes to Mexico in exile, and he lives there for 13 years. And in 1940, somebody comes in working for Stalin. They have his name in the internet and puts an ice pick in his eye and leaves it there, right? An ice pick is kind of like a hammer, but with, I guess, the short side of the hammer with one spike in it, right? Sticks in his eye and they leave it there. I think they killed his wife too. In Mexico, Leon Trotsky dies in 1940. And what is going on is this is right before World War II, right? But Leon Trotsky dying at 1940, seen something, and he tried to warn Russia about some type of nationalism and internationalism. Okay, he wrote years before World War II ended, before it even started, that Russia needed to be internationally industrialized, right? And this idea should haunt Russia, right? Like some type of specter or some type of ghost, right? He was saying that in 1940s or before the 1940s that Russia needed to internationalize and industrialize, okay? So what happens is World War II breaks out, right, after Trotsky dies, and the war ends when Hitler is fighting on two fronts, right? On one hand, he has to hold down the shores of Normandy, and on the other hand, he takes the Nazis and goes into Russia in the winter, right? In a really harsh winter, and they couldn't turn around, and they were pretty much left for stranded, and the Nazis lose to Russia. Leon Trotsky's message to the Central Committee while he was in exile in Mexico represents World War II in a way where the two people I'm going to mention, the two parties I'm going to mention, are deficient in what Leon Trotsky was saying to the Central Committee, okay? The first party being the Nazi Party. what the Nazi Party lacked in regards to, you could say, in some type of socialism or communism, and I say this as European conservatives, that Adolf Hitler did not go international, at least you could say when he conquered the different countries, his neighboring countries, they weren't assimilated properly, right? For them to take the German banner, okay? And they were deficient of what Trotsky was saying about you need to go international, okay? It's kind of vague, but just moving forward, Russia, well, the USSR, Stalin's USSR, was lacking the industry, okay? So this was written, again, I want to say, before World War II started, right? So what he says could have been used by either of these parties in one side or the other, right? Hitler with the internationalism and Russia with the industrialization, okay? So after World War II ends, right, Hitler loses. And what happens is they put up a wall straight to Germany, right? In one way, representing the Cold War, right? It's kind of like a block against their former Western allies, right? Russia. In a way, that's kind of becoming nationalistic, but when the USSR fell, it became 15 different countries, right? We could look at it as an individual collectivism falling into individualism, okay? And we look at Nazi Germany as, you could say, a collective, or at what point was he an individual? The Nazis were an individual among the global society, right? All right, so to wrap up this stuff on Russia, okay, we're gonna start heading into this idea of rights, and we're gonna talk about the rights in Western society. Now, when World War II ended, it was a very cold winter, and Russia was dealing with all types of problems. And one of them was the potato famine. And I believe the bubonic plague could have been one of those things too, right? They were dealing with all of that, and the people were starving, right? What happens was, perhaps Stalin was too scared to be spread out thinly among all of the, I guess you could say, 13 time zones across the globe, right? So he takes the party mainly and puts it in St. Petersburg and Moscow, right? And what happens is he implements what we call a shock therapy, where all the outliers outside of St. Petersburg and Moscow are cut off within the USSR, right? A lack of a lack of internationalism, right? That's what Stalin is again doing when we reference it to what Trotsky was writing before this all happens, right? But one thing I really want to point out is that a lot of people died from the starvation, right? This shock therapy. And a lot of it could have been prevented if they weren't holding on to too much of these capitalistic ideologies, right? And I'm going to explain how so, okay? The people in Poland, which they say from the USSR got hit the hardest, the people in Poland, if they were to use the land and started farming, if they could have, or used the land freely rather than it was not their right to use it, they probably could have made more food or sustained themselves better. But it was their ideology of capitalism that didn't allow them to farm as much, right? I'm just saying in one way or another, people aren't freely able to use land when they're starving in any society. But for Russia, Stalinist USSR, to say that they're a communist and this is what failed the Russians was communism. It was actually something capitalistic, where capitalism, the mindset, didn't allow them to utilize their resources, right? This happens every single day, pretty much everywhere, you could say. So we're coming in towards 33 minutes of the lecture, and I kind of want to leave all this Russia stuff to the side, but I do want to finish it by saying that people didn't have a right to survive, right? We're talking about a right to property, right? To utilize property, and it's a simple thing, okay? I'm going to leave that there, and we're going to shift to, you could say, American politics, okay? This segment of the video, I am going to say it's about Nietzsche's reevaluation of values, and he does it in a different sense where it's not necessarily applied the way I'm gonna apply these things. And this is only like a very introductory level of reevaluating of values, okay? And I'm gonna talk about rights. And I just want to say that this is just a familiarizing of what you can do when you reevaluate just something at all. And what we're reevaluating for the rest of the video are rights, okay? So what we want to do is look at this relationship between rights and power, okay? What kind of rights give us what kind of power, so to speak? Here, because what I've been talking about, when we throw in the moral dimension or the ethical dimension, I'm going to say that some powers are stronger and some powers are weaker, okay? And when I say that morality, the realm of morality extends beyond the individual, you would say, or we could say, that that's a sense of power, right? Rather than just a mere gratification. And we're going to say a greater power in terms of potential, okay? And when we look at power personally, we want to make it so that power is the most power, okay, rather than a weaker power, okay? And here, we don't have to say whether it's individual or stately or collectively. We are going to say what is the most power, okay? This power is a timeless power, okay? And the way I'm saying that it's a timeless power is it's not a means to an end, okay? It's not a person using their power to get other people to become a state, right? And it's not a state using people to become international, okay? It's more of building or having a growth of power eternally rather than individually or collectively, okay? It's beyond the human scope, you could say. Now, you might have already questioned why we don't give the power to the people around us, whether it be the individual or the collective state. I want to say that Nietzsche would say that man is a bridge to an end, right? Man is a means to an end, and that end is power, right? And morally, we should never treat anyone as a means to an end. But we're going to look at it as something that's necessary, okay? So we have to get to power in one way or the other. And when I get into Nietzsche, I'm going to take a negation of the word power itself, okay? And I actually have it written already, and if something happens to me, I'm pretty sure someone could find it, okay? A lot of so-called Nietzscheans get into this power frenzy, okay? And I'm not one of those, okay? I try not to mention power, but with power comes value, okay? I am more interested in being more valuable than being more powerful, okay? So this section of the lecture, when we talk about rights, we're going to talk about bringing out value, okay? And the more value you bring out, the more powerful you are, okay? Now, speaking of power, I said I drank an energy drink earlier. It was this one. I don't even know what it is. I don't even know if it's caffeine or anything. I don't even know what's in it. I usually read the labels, but I didn't read this label because it's in Thai. But the sun's gonna come up, and I'm gonna keep going, and we're gonna watch the sun come up, and hopefully I'll get it done in one sitting. So this was an all-nighter for me. So all that was the second section. Okay, the first section was the Russian section. Whatever I said recently was the next section. And this is another section. Okay, well, it's kind of continuance, but I just kind of left it there, and we're just gonna like really get into the American topics, or the topics that are in America. Okay, and I'm gonna do a loose outline of it to know what we're gonna talk about, in case, well, just to help us have retention. Okay, and if I get lost, I'm going to look back at this. The first topic of rights is we're going to talk about marriage rights, right? Heterosexual marriage, gay marriage, okay? And it's a common theme in the States to discuss this, okay? The next one after that, if I go in this order, would be property rights, okay? We're going to talk about libertarians and what they do in politics. Okay, so their thing is property rights in a way, right? Gun rights and freedom of speech and whatnot. Okay, and then we're going to talk about abortion and how it stands on the right or left side of the political spectrum. We're going to shift every single one of these from one side to the other, okay, by reevaluating the rights, okay? And this is pretty unique to me when it comes to political philosophy. And this is why I'm saying that when you understand what I'm saying, you have the best set of understanding the political spectrum, okay? Because you're able to reevaluate everything, okay? So plain and simple, we're gonna talk about marriage rights, okay? And what's going on in the modern day discussion, okay? What does the left say? What does the right say? The right says that queer people should not be allowed to marry, right? It's the sanctity of marriage. And the left are going to argue that they deserve the right just as much as the heterosexuals, right to marriage. So they're situated to seem that the right, the conservatives, are defending the institution of marriage, while the left are wanting the same right, okay? And Nietzsche talks about this in a way where, I'm going to read a quote, where humanity is some type of preservation, okay? So this is one of Nietzsche's famous aphorisms. Not his most famous, but it's a famous aphorism. And we're going to talk about the metaphors in this aphorism. And he uses an ape, okay? And what's going on is man is laughing at this ape, right? Because the man is believing that the ape has not evolved in contrast to the man, okay? And the quote goes like this: "What is ape to man? A laughing stock or painful embarrassment? And man shall be that to the overman," right? The overman is something that is beyond the man, right? The overman is going to laugh at the man, right? The Superman is going to laugh at the man, the Ubermensch, okay? This is one of my first mutters of the Ubermensch. I'll read it again, I'm sorry. "What is ape to man? A laughing stock or painful embarrassment? And man shall be that to overman, a laughing stock or a painful embarrassment. You have made your way from worm to man, and much in you is still worm. Once you were apes, and even now, too, man is more ape than any ape." And that is the end of the quote that I want to discuss. But he's saying, once you were apes, and even now, too, man is more ape than any ape, okay? And I'm talking about rights of marriage, okay? And I said that man was a preservation. Now, what is going on is the right conservatives are saying that the lefties are going to ruin the sanctity of marriage, okay? And in modern day society, people say that the left are so entrenched with the right, no, with their rights, right? The left is so entrenched with the rights that everything about rights, if they feel violated, they're gonna cry about it, okay? But what's going on here is the right-wing heterosexual marriage, right? They are saying that they know about this right more than the left, because this right should be for heterosexual marriage, okay? And what I'm saying here is that they are more ape than any man, because they're preserving this idea, the sanctity of marriage, and a certain type of perspective of humanity, okay? But when you look at the grand scheme of things, them being in the political right in the modern day, if we just say rights is some type of liberalism, they're really far onto the left, where they care about the rights so much that they know what rights are and what they should be more than anyone else, right? They're complaining that someone else is doing what they're doing, but only they have a right to it, right? You can see that this is you don't see it in general, but they're prioritizing their rights more than what they say as people are over liberalized, right? This is a reinforcing of liberalization of someone's rights is what the right wing is doing, okay? And I'm just using this to overturn from where the common right wing say what heterosexual marriage is, to become a liberalized thing, marriage, okay? More ape than any ape, okay? So again, at the beginning of this video, I said I was confident in the content of this video. So just leave that there, okay? Come back to it after the video is over, or, you know, mess with it after the second or third time you watch this video. But the next thing we talk about is what I say, the libertarians, okay, and how they're on the right side of the spectrum, okay. Now, the libertarians, they believe that private property is one of their main goals to preserve the rights to private property, right? But at the same time, they believe in people defending themselves, so you're allowed to have the right to bear arms, okay? And not only that, they believe the rights to bear arms because they think that the government is out to get them, so you should have your arms to protect yourself from the government, right? This is typical American libertarianism, okay? And I said I'm gonna shift them over, okay? Now, what is going on is libertarians, they're being used in a way, okay, by major corporations, right? People, when I say corporations, I'm going to say people at the higher end of the monopoly game, okay? Because they believe in people's rights to private property, it allows people to become corporations, okay? And the corporations themselves are, in libertarian theory, able to hire armies, right, to protect their wealth, right? That's part of the libertarian, you know, ideology, that they are able to hire armies, okay? But they fail to realize that this is pretty much governments, corporations over people, right? Armies got tanks, helicopters, rockets, and libertarians have guns, right? And they don't see that they're giving corporations, which pretty much are the governments, more power by defending the property rights, okay? I think we'll get back to that, okay? But for now, that's all you need to know about the libertarians, okay? But the libertarians are the right wings, and they believe in property rights, okay? So just to kind of summarize what's going on is I'm going to introduce the word liberalization, okay? And this is just the American sense of liberalization, right? The left and their infatuation with the right, okay? And I am saying that we're going to reevaluate and shift these to the other side of what the American politics currently is, okay? And let's look at abortion here. Now, we commonly say that the people that are pro-choice are liberals, and the people that are pro-life are conservative, right? But what's really going on here, right, in terms of liberalization, okay? We could say, you know, you can entertain this thought, and I think it's going to make sense that the right are actually the over-liberalization, are doing the over-liberalization by giving rights to a fetus, right? Giving rights to something that isn't even born yet, okay? or even have conception yet, okay, future generations of eternity or whatever, right? The right wing has given something a right to live because of their liberalization, okay? I could get more into it, but that, if you look at it that way, right, that they're giving a rights to a fetus who doesn't even know it's alive or won't know that it's being murdered or can't tell you that it's in pain or whatever. I'm not saying that it doesn't have pain, but it's minimal compared to a consciousness, right? But this liberalization, I'm going to say, we allow this to degrade the gene pool, which is a huge problem that we will talk about even further when we get into Nietzsche, okay? But what I said now, that it is degrading our gene pool and our happiness, right? And what we could utilize in the world for value and more value, as composed to more value, I mean, okay? Value as compared to what we can do with more value with less people around, okay? Because here I'm gonna start moving towards private property and its limitations, okay? So in this video, I am critical of both sides, okay? So if one side holds one thing, I'm pushing it to the other side, okay? And the way I'm going to be critical about the left is this, okay? The left wants healthcare, right? And we've seen recently, there has been a CEO of a healthcare company that was murdered by a guy named Luigi Mangione, okay? And I'm gonna take a look at it as people are recognizing what's going on about this whole thing about healthcare and private property, okay? People cannot all have healthcare when there's value being hidden from other people without access to these resources, right? And the state of capitalism is kind of showing us that the healthcare companies aren't willing to pay for people's health. Rather, they're in it for a profit, and they're going to try to not pay out what they've been given by customers, right? And somebody got so mad at one of the CEOs and killed him, and now he's in jail currently. Okay. We're going to take it as people are starting to recognize something. Okay. But with the left, right, and liberalism, you know, people's right to health care, right to marriage, gay marriage, what else I say? Right to, shit, I forgot what I just say. Health care, marriage, libertarians' right to private property, okay? Now, I'm gonna say that the left, right, are so entrenched into the right, into liberalism, not the right, into liberalism, that they care about all rights, right? Not really focusing on one right or the other as much. Okay, so when they say they want free healthcare, it is impossible because of property rights. Okay. Now, the way I'm I'm putting this out is that capitalists hide inside of liberalism because private property is a right. Okay. So the liberals are going to defend private property. Okay. But I think they've kind of recognized a few things, right? I'm sure it'd be okay if these days, if they took Tesla and made it public and let people take the profit that the most powerful electric company in the United States reaps in and gives it back to the people, right? Because the people are starting to learn, right? There's a big anti-Elon Musk campaign going on right now, right? And somewhere down in the line of seizing the means of production, there's going to be a threshold of what people will take and give to the people, right? To people hindering on the rights to private property, right? And I'm saying that that line is emphasized, and perhaps it's inflated or deflated, but there is a line where people have a right to private property, okay? But how far do you defend it, right? In terms of libertarianism, I'm bringing back to libertarianism to tie all this in, right? The libertarians are defending property rights, but at the same time, they're allowing corporations to grow bigger and monopolize till the later stages of capitalism, the later state of the monopoly game. You see what I'm saying? But that right belongs to liberalism, because that's it's the extremity of liberalization is this property rights, and especially when you contrast it with the other rights that the people want, right? So property rights is you can put that into the American lefty as rights, okay? Abortion, when you say the pro-life, you could put that into the liberalization of rights for the fetus rather than what the human wants, right? It's, okay. Marriage rights is a liberalization of rights where people know what this right is more than others. Well, they believe, they think they know, but they are not able to evolve and are prolonging to this idea of marriage, right? And a lot of times the heterosexual marriage is more problematic statistically than the queer marriage, right? So one last thing on this section, and we'll get to the last section, okay? You cannot ask for Social Security, health care, Medicaid, and still protect property rights, right? And call it a right as much as those other things, okay? It's a divisive tactic that the way it's set up this way, okay? It's a divisive tactic the way politics is set up this way, okay? We in America call Stalin and Hitler lefties, but in European politics, they are actually right-wing, but we are being fed a different version of a political spectrum, okay? And with some thought, you should be able to see through it, okay? And I said that this is the best mindset in political spectrum that you could have, because you've shifted everything from one end to the other. You have the capability of doing it. It's possible, right? I gave you the content to do it, okay? Last section, we're gonna talk about terrorists, okay? And the way I'm gonna do it is I'm gonna show you what Donald Trump said in a 2012 miniseries on the History Channel, okay? You're gonna hear the audio, but he's saying that he likes bad economies, okay?
That I do better in bad markets. I buy things in bad markets. And you can't do that in a great economy. You can't buy it. Either you're going to buy it very expensively or not be able to buy it at all. So there's a lot of opportunity I find in the bad times. Find that I do better in bad markets. I buy.
Right? So it looks like he's crashing the market, right? With the terrorists, right? He is going against the traditional, let the free market capitalism reign, and going authoritarianism, right? This is what's going on. But what I really want to put out before this video ends is this whole idea about how a party changes the political spectrum, okay? How did the party of Abraham Lincoln, the Republican Party, become the party they are today, okay? And with the terrorists, we could see how it has happened in the past. I'm not saying this is exactly how it happened, but it takes time, right? This is very important, okay? And what happens is there's a dominant party at a time, right? And I want to draw on the aspect that they use something like religion to power another party at one point, right? Here, people believe that Donald Trump is a man of God, right? He's a man of God. And what goes on is they believe anything he says because they believe that he's ordained by God. And we're going to talk about being ordained by God a lot more in Nietzsche, okay? But I do want to point that out, that when somebody is a leader of a party that has been brought down by or given the power from God, that people are just going to believe them no matter what they say, even if it goes against their traditional values, right? When Donald Trump ran for office, he said that he was going to put these terrorists out, these terrorists. And these terrorists are pretty much authoritarianism, right? And it's messing with our free market capitalism. It's just driving our prices up. Our relationships with international people, with China, which we used to be able to get products cheap from the Wish app, right? Donald Trump's first term in office destroyed that app because everything inflated like 2-3 times, right? Currently, we have the Temu app, and that is going to disappear, I assume, like the Wish app, because of the tariffs, right? China can't sell us cheap products the way they used to do. And I'm not saying like we need these products, and I think we do need a lot of these products, right? But what I'm saying is he is meddling into this relationship of free market capitalism becoming authoritarianism, right? And putting a tariff on those people, while now China is putting a tariff on the exporters into China, right? How did this happen? Was a party who had the power overreached their common platform, right? And the right wing have become authoritarian, where they believe the government, they don't believe, but they don't know, or they are allowing the government, who they say that the government should not intervene with their business, they're allowing the government to intervene in their business because of, you could say, I do want to throw in that aspect again, the religious reason, but just perhaps they're just too lazy to think for themselves, right? But this is what's going on. And the Republican Party of Abraham Lincoln is shifted through things like wanting to overreach for a more bigger central government, or I know too specifically that at one time they wanted to expand the railroads, right? A long ass time ago, like in the 1800s, and we still have the shittiest railroad system in relative to the world. I could probably blame politics. And then it had something to do with the postal office, right? They wanted the whatever party that was at power extended them to reach over and change the whole political face by wanting to open up a post office, right? And it's just always something like that, right? But what I'm saying is that we could see what's going on with it when it comes to the tariffs that are being implemented today, where a whole party overreaches its standard platform, and kind of now, when it comes to tariffs, the left, are going towards capitalism, right? A normal capitalism versus authoritarianism, right? He's shifting the political party, right? And we got to notice this, right? It's one of my main things that I wanted to say in this video, and I didn't get to it to the very end. Okay. Now, the very last thing I want to say is that Trump is doing what Stalin did when it comes to shock therapy, right? Trump is like, I guess you could say, our rich friend that has a lot of money, and he wants to do all this stuff, and he's in control of everything, and he could do whatever he wants, right? He could last through a trade war tariff while the people are going to suffer, right? He's going through a shock therapy. He doesn't even know like how we're gonna replace, how long it's gonna take for us to build our own but he's cutting us off, right? Like how Stalin did to the people of Poland, right? Or to the people outside of St. Petersburg and Moscow, right? Shock therapy is what Trump is doing, right? Uh, he also has a list of enemies who he possesses and takes them out in one way or the other, which is like Stalin. He has video editors of the from the media, right? Somehow, the Democrats lost 20 million votes or something like that last election, right? Um, I think that's it, yo. No, so you got a glimpse of what happened about how the Republican Party of Abraham Lincoln is the Republican Party today, right? It's not necessarily that the Republican Party back then, you know, would do the same things today. It's just not the same party, right? It's a lot to think about, right? But I don't say you need to, but this has the content for you to work with, okay? I think that's it, okay? This was actually a really good video, very important. Uh, so hit the like and share it to one of your friends about politics. You could with, you could soundly argue with anybody, right? This is really infallible about what's going on in politics, right? When people try to tell you what is right, what is wrong, or if you take the stance of value, right? If you were to rearrange everything and place all the rights on one side, like when we look at it, instead of on both sides, how it's just muddled, you'd be able to we'd be able to free ourselves up a little more, right? It's valuable for the future generations to understand this, to learn from our mistakes, okay? Okay. Thanks for watching. Share, like, think about it. Watch it a few times. I shot a video in Bangkok. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool, huh?